Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our full council today, Tuesday, the 8th of December at 9:30. This will be a virtual meeting.
Councillor Deans.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Davis. Present. Okay, Councillor Francis is present. Councillor Ned.
Yeah, Councillor.
Okay, Councillor Marcus. Present. Councillor Roger.
Present on the telephone.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Watt.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Lady Barclay. Councillor Lady Barclay? No. Councillor Dorian Smith? Councillor Dorian Smith? No. Councillor Mrs. Bottick?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Guy?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Mumford?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Nellams? Councillor Nellams? No. And Councillor Sims?
Present.
Thank you. That completes the roll call, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Before we start with item 1, I would just like to mention that item 16 on the agenda relating to the licensing policy is being deferred until January for further consideration. I would also like to mention, before I do the declarations of interest, that although I do not have a direct interest, in view of my involvement with the RNLI and the lifeboat, I will be withdrawing from item 9 on the agenda, and the chair will be taken by the vice chair during that item. So item 1 on our agenda is declarations of interest, please. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to mention that I represent the Council on the Cornwall Partnership Trust in the Local Enterprise Partnership, and so I won't vote on the application with regarding the charging points for the Go EV project. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations? Councillor Watt. You're muted, Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry about that. In view of your declaration on Policy 9, because of the involvement with the RNLI, as a press officer, I assume that I should also declare an interest on 9.
Okay. Thank you. Any further declarations, please? No? Thank you. I'd like to move on to item 2 on our agenda, which are to confirm as a correct record the minutes of our previous meeting, held on the 5th of November. Are there any issues with those minutes, please, from anybody? And could I please have a proposer for their confirmation?
Proposed.
Councillor Mumford, thank you. And a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Anybody against the confirmation of those minutes, please? No, then they are confirmed. Thank you very much. Item 3 on the agenda is Chairman's announcements. I'd just like to mention that, as you will all hopefully be aware, following the lockdown, we are now moved into Tier 1. And I would just like to remind everybody, not just members, but members of the public, our community, that we still have to make sure that we do not let our guard down. We need to make sure that we maintain our social distancing, and we need to make sure that we keep to the rules of Tier 1, which are publicised on our website. So I would just like to reaffirm that, please, to make sure that we don't let up on the good work that's been done by everybody. And on that note, I would like to say, on behalf of myself and the Vice Chair and all members of the Council, to thank everybody in our community, all our staff, all our partners, and indeed the community yourselves, for the huge effort that has been put into dealing with this pandemic over the past year, and keeping us as safe as we have been kept safe, which is a phenomenal effort, and probably one of the best efforts, if not the best, in the country. So on behalf of all of us, I would like to say a big thank you and to extend our Christmas wishes to you all, and hope that the new year brings us better times. But thank you all very much indeed. Move on to item 4 on the agenda now, which is questions under Standing Order 14. I have none. Item 5 on the agenda is to consider minutes from committees, and there's just one committee, which was the Outbreak Board, which I chaired. There's nothing significant to report from that, unless anybody has any questions on that, please. Thank you. So we move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is to consider motions in accordance with Standing Order 12. I have none. Item 7 on the agenda are urgent items, and I have none. So we move on to Part 1 reports now. Agenda item 8, the first of our planning applications, the Dolphin House in the hands of our Senior Officer of Planning and Development, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Chairman. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
This application is brought to full council on the basis that the applicant is related to a councillor of this authority. The report is a combined planning application and listed building consent application for internal and external alterations to a Grade 2 listed building on Tresco. Works include a number of internal alterations that see the removal of some of the late 20th century features, such as a staircase and its replacement with a staircase which removes use of the attic bedrooms, as well as a number of other internal changes that seek to sympathetically update the interior and reintroduce some of the more traditional spaces. Externally, the proposal sees an extension on the existing single-storey side extension, as well as the removal of a rear extension and its replacement with a larger extension, which will connect to the outbuildings to the rear to replace the bedrooms lost through the removal of the attic bedrooms. So whilst some harm is identified to the overall significance of Dolphin House, This is considered to be less than substantial, and it's balanced with the positive improvements made to the elements of this building that are not original. So overall, the proposal is considered to be acceptable, and both applications are recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Councillor Marcus, do you have any comments to make, please?
No other comments apart from what Lisa has made. It seems to be a good plan, improving on what is already there by removing that 20th century extension. No other comments apart from just proposing the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chair. I would agree with the comments just made by the lead member for planning, and I'm happy to second the recommendation for approval. However, I would just like to check with the planning officer that the quite significant comments made by Cornwall Fire and Rescue will be able to be accommodated and monitored without reference to a condition, because I believe now that if we were to condition it, we should have had a conversation before this with the applicant. So can I just be reassured that the comments of Cornwall Fire and Rescue will be fully considered and taken into account? Thank you.
Yes, just to come back on that, Fran, that they will be addressed in the building control application that they will have to secure as part of the works. So I can add a note on to remind them of the Cornwall Fire and Rescue requirements, but I would usually expect them to comply with those requirements at the building control, building regulations stage.
Thank you. They do seem to me to be quite challenging.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, Lisa, on paragraph 38 regarding policy LC9. I just wasn't clear from reading the report whether this increase in space would contravene that standard, should it be in the local plan or not, in terms of the maximum size.
It's an interesting question. So had this been a local need home or a permanently occupied home, then yes, it would. It would be significantly above the space standard. But it is already significantly above the standards that are the minimum national described space standards, and above the 30% that we're putting in the local plan as the maximum. So yes, it does go over that, but this is a long-standing holiday let on Tresco, which our tourism development policy, which includes tourism, doesn't include a minimum, because we do have a lot of very small-scale holiday let projects coming on. It doesn't include a maximum either, because we have some very large properties. So there isn't that policy threshold for that.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anyone else wishing to come in. We have a proposer for the granting of this application and a seconder. Is there anybody against approving this application, please? No, thank you. Then this application is granted. So we're now at item 9 on the agenda, at which point I shall withdraw and hand over to Vice Chair Councillor Grottick. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We'll now move on to the second application on our planning list, which is for a replacement building where the garage stroke boat shed is currently in Buzzer Road. So I will ask Lisa Walton to introduce this, please.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. This application is brought back to full council following a deferral at the full council meeting in October 2020. Whilst it appeared that the proposal was considered acceptable in principle, members voted to defer the application to provide the applicant with an opportunity to amend the scheme. The application has been amended and the requisite reconsultation has been carried out. And given the nature of the amendment, the scheme has attracted the same level of objections to the originally submitted application. In addition to the representations made directly to the planning department, officers have been made aware of a number of issues made directly to councillors, so I'd just like to clarify some of those points. So the updated covering report is relatively brief because the amendments were very simple, and it was clear from the representations received that the amended dwelling had not addressed the fundamental concerns. The assessment sought to explain the amendments and address any further issues raised in the objections, and the report does not go into the detail or repeat the issues that had not changed. In terms of environmental impact assessment development, the proposed dwelling is located in a sensitive environment, as are all planning applications on the Isles of Scilly. Officers carry out a basic screening of all planning applications, but the scale of a single dwelling has not resulted in the application being considered EIA development, that's environmental impact assessment development. And that means an environmental impact assessment is drawing together an assessment of the likely significant environmental effects arising from a proposed development in a systematic way, and it ensures that environmental implications of decisions on development proposals are taken into account before decisions are made. Developments falling within the description in Schedule 1 of the 2017 EIA regulations always require an environmental impact assessment. These tend to be larger developments or those with potentially the most significant environmental effects, such as airports, oil refineries and motorways. Developments of a type listed in Schedule 2 to the 2017 EIA regulations may require an environmental impact assessment. And this depends on whether it's likely to have a significant effect on the environment by virtue of factors such as size, nature or location. And Schedule 2 developments can include things such as wind turbines, certain industrial developments, golf courses, larger housing proposals, and a wide range of other types of developments. The proposal relates to an existing granite boat shed garage which is proposed to be demolished and replaced with a two-storey dwelling, and this does not require the submission of an environmental statement and would not result in any likely significant effects that could be harmful to the designations of the Isles of Scilly. Reference to the front of the neighbouring house was not intended to suggest it was not an important part of the neighbouring property. So the covering report sought to clarify, one, that the distance from the front extension of the neighbouring property to the boundary of the site versus the front of the extension to the position of the proposed dwelling, and then the distance of the original two-storey section of the neighbouring house and the position of the proposed dwelling, whereas the representation just suggested the gap was just the width of the road. So it was just trying to clarify that actually the gap between the two properties is more than just the width of the road. It wasn't trying to disregard it as an important part of their home. In terms of greenfield and brownfield, then generally speaking, the curtilage of a building, which does include garden land, is considered previously developed land. The applicant does own the land which includes the garage structure, and for the purposes of planning, the site would generally be considered previously developed land rather than a greenfield site. This is a generalised opinion, but a greenfield site would include land such as public open space, recreational fields and agricultural land, or sites with important natural environment designations. In terms of whether the proposed development is considered to be overdevelopment, then there is no set ratio of what would constitute overdevelopment. But the larger site, together with the revised design, resulted in your office's conclusion that the proposal was no longer overdevelopment of the site than the previously refused scheme. Commentary on the amendments to the existing dwelling are purely on the dwelling as submitted, which the architect considered would be detrimentally compromised by significant alterations to the design. So the proposal has been assessed against both the adopted and emerging local plan and is considered to be acceptable in principle. The design is a modern approach using vernacular elements such as granite, timber, render and slate. Dwelling is within the minimum required in terms of space standards and within the maximum as currently subject to, or has just been subject to consultation. The site is largely previously developed land, sustainably located within Hugh and it currently comprises a deteriorating garage structure. It's also recognised outstanding need for local need dwellings, of which the proposal would be counted towards. It's located at the foot of Buzzer Hill. The site is not identified as an important gap site within the conservation area, and the existing garage boat shed is not otherwise identified as a heritage asset. Although located relatively close to the edge of Hugh, the surrounding land is built up and the site is surrounded by residential developments of various ages and designs. The proposed dwelling seeks to deliver a local need home whilst reflecting on the prominence of the site by seeking to find an appropriate balance between the older and more traditional styles of homes in the area, but with a more modern and sustainable twist. There are a number of representations to the proposed development, and those are being considered in the report, and it's acknowledged that proposal will have some impact upon the amenity of neighbouring properties, but reflecting on the density of buildings within Hugh and the position of the dwelling relative to the plot, which seeks to retain an adequate gap, in addition to the width of the road, as well as careful positioning of doors and windows, the impact has been considered as on balance acceptable. The scale and design of the dwelling has been assessed as appropriate for the site, and on balance, while some shadowing will occur as a result of the larger structure, it is not considered to be so severe as to restrict outlook for the neighbouring properties. The proposal is balanced with the wider gains of delivering a sustainable local need home and improving the appearance of a prominent site within the conservation area. The size of the dwelling is considered to be appropriate and within the parameters of the nationally described space standards, and subject to the conditions set out in the report and the applicant entering into a legal agreement to restrict occupancy, the application is still recommended for approval. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. I'd like to ask the lead member for planning if he would like to commence the discussion, please.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all the members of the public that spent time writing to the planning department again, and separately to members describing their objections to the proposed plan. There are a couple of points from those representations that I think bear discussion, namely the heritage of the existing garage, and the main factor, the loss of light or shadowing of the surrounding properties. From reading the arguments, I can't agree with the position that the existing garage is part of the Solonian boat building heritage. From the evidence presented to me, I can see the building didn't exist in the 1900s. I'm not being presented with any evidence that the site was part of the general industry of boat building on Port Cressa. Therefore, I've got to discount this argument as a means of refusal. Loss of light is more concerning. I've tried to visualise this building each time I walk through this site daily. I'm concerned about the mass of the proposals. By its very nature, i.e. it's a new building, it will have an impact on the surrounding buildings and the immediacy of those buildings. I have to say that I am disappointed the applicants only amended the ridge height by 20 centimetres, and that has made this decision harder and more contentious than it needs to be. Like the previous application, separate application on different sites, I'm conflicted between wanting to preserve the status quo and protect the council from an appeal that will not be defensible. So, can I ask Lisa, if members were to object to the proposal, what are the planning merits of rejection due to loss of light from the surrounding properties?
Okay, so it is a reasonable conclusion for members to come to rebalance the issues and give more weight to the issue of harm to the overbearing nature of the proposal. And that is a reasonable planning consideration and one that could be used to reject the application, if that's your question.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to leave it there, Fran, and throw it open to the rest of the members.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford, you wish to speak?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. At the last meeting when this application was considered, we asked for the height of the building to be brought down. They have done this by a paltry 20 centimetres. We have to consider the objections of this application, otherwise why do we bother to carry them? Councillor Marcus has just mentioned the loss of light, which I think is a problem. And a lot of the applications were about the size of the building, and I believe a single story, maybe with dormer windows, would be acceptable to the neighbours. Applications relating to this site have, down the years, consistently been refused on the same grounds: overdevelopment. 1975, refused on grounds of overdevelopment. 1977 refused on the grounds of overdevelopment. In 1987, the two-bedroom house refused on grounds of overdevelopment. This was appealed, but the council's overdevelopment decision was upheld. More recently, an application in 2019 was withdrawn because, wait for it, overdevelopment. And here we are again, ladies and gentlemen, with a larger development, which in my opinion, and taking notice of the overdeveloped surrounding houses, is not in keeping with the character of the surrounding houses. Does not the repeated occurrence of the word overdevelopment tell us something? Chairman, to approve this, I think, would be a travesty.
Thank you, Councillor Mumford. Tim Dean. Councillor Dean, would you like to speak?
As housing lead, obviously I'm supportive of housing need property being built. You know, that's obviously an objective for us. But I have to agree with Councillor Mumford. I think the building is too big, and when it came to full council 2 months ago, we deferred it with a view to the height of the property being reduced. And as Councillor Mumford has said, 20 centimetres, 8 inches is, in some contexts might be considered quite big, but I mean, on the scale of a 6-metre building, it's very paltry, and it's disappointing. And just one final point, and this is kind of a bit of advice for any application in the future, I would say, is to consult with your neighbours. I mean, there's things like every single neighbour around there is objecting. And a lot of this could have been avoided if there'd been some consultation from the applicant beforehand. But my question, I suppose, is we've deferred it once, and I don't see that anything's changed. Can we defer it again, or do we have to refuse the application?
Can I come back on that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So the applicant did consult with neighbours, and I understand has done each time. We've always recommended that they talk to the neighbours of this site, and I understand that has taken place. I don't know what was said by either side, but there has been consultation with neighbouring properties. The question you just asked is you can defer it. That is within your power to do. The applicant has said they want a decision on this application, so either they would prefer not to be deferred. One of the options open to them, if it is deferred, is an appeal against non-determination of the application. So they could start the appeal process if you defer it. But they would prefer a decision.
Okay. My point really was that 20 centimetres doesn't constitute a substantial change to the application, and we deferred it last time. So it seems to me we should defer it again with a view to him reducing the height of the building. But that's my view. That's my 2 pennies worth. I'll leave it there.
I would just say, colleagues, that when the chairman indicated to me that he would be withdrawing from this particular application, I did seek advice from the monitoring officer, and I'd like him to confirm that his feeling was that it would be fair to the applicants to actually come to a firm decision today. We're not asking for them. I mean, it seems to me, picking up on colleagues' comments, and I will obviously ask more colleagues to speak in a moment, that we are not just asking for more amendments. It seems that the feeling of the meeting so far is that we would be asking for significant change, in which case I would suggest that we should come to a clear decision today, and then we have a level playing field. But obviously I'm chairing this item, and I don't wish to influence colleagues' contributions, which we will carry on with in a moment. But I would just ask the monitoring officer if he would like to speak to us before we proceed.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The matters that have been raised by members are, as Councillor Mumford has said, very, very similar to the reasons for refusal in the past. I'm not convinced that the overdevelopment of the site is any longer a particularly relevant matter, because the site has been extended significantly, as Lisa has already said. So therefore the relevant issues from the previous reason for refusal relate to the overbearing and dominant nature of the site, as members have, whether if members consider that the case, and also whether or not the appearance in the street scene would preserve or enhance the character or appearance of the conservation area. You are right in the sense that there's no point in deferring if there is no reasonable prospect of a significant change, and it requires the applicant to make a decision as to whether or not you're prepared to accept the proposal or whether you wish to refuse it in its current form.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go round now for people who haven't spoken before, please, and then come back to anyone who wishes to add to their initial comments. Councillor Guy, you haven't spoken yet. Councillor Guy, you're muted.
I'm not now, am I?
No, you're not.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. My point is, we as a council are encouraged to build houses for local need by central government. Here we have an application for just this point. We have a planning approval to grant planning permission by our own planning officer. Now, my understanding is there has been 3 or 4 different designs proposed by the applicants to the planning office, and this is what our planning office have actually agreed on. One question I've got for Lisa is, and I don't know if you can give me a precise answer, Lisa, but bearing in mind the history of this application, if it did go to appeal, which looks like it possibly will, could you give us a rough gauge of what the cost would be or not?
That is really difficult to answer because this is not a developer. This isn't a person with a history of planning appeals. This is a local person just trying to build their own home. So they don't have any record of appealing and winning appeals and getting costs awarded against the council. I would suggest that if you're not being unreasonable in the decision and you're coming to a clearly balanced refusal using material planning reasons, then you're unlikely to be perceived as being unreasonable to have costs awarded against the council. So the risks are lower if you stick to material planning reasons and you explain those clearly in the reasons for refusal, and that reduces the chance of the council being faced with costs should the applicant like. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you for that. On your, I'm just going to chuck this in the ring now. As you have said in your report that you are willing to grant planning permission for this application. I'm going to support it and propose 1 and 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. If we could just listen to the views of people who haven't spoken yet, and then we will come back to your proposal to accept. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I think this is a very tricky application. I think a lot of members are very sympathetic to the needs for local housing. This is a particularly difficult site, I think, as the members of the public that have written in have demonstrated. I support a lot of what Councillor Dean says, although personally I wouldn't support deferment. Just a question for clarification, really, to Lisa, please, on paragraph 7, and this refers to the overlooking. And there's a statement that the impact is not considered so severe. I just wondered what the kind of quantitative measurement is there. Well, what are we measuring against? What's severity considered to be?
Oh, okay. So the main habitable room windows of the proposed dwelling generally face south over Porth Cressa. There are high-level windows which don't permit overlooking, and there are low-level windows that don't permit overlooking. They are purely for light, to light the internal space. And there are 2 windows on the proposed scheme which would face, one face north and one face east, and there's a condition that requires details of those windows to be submitted so we can get those obscurely glazed. And I understand that they're not providing a view, they're just for light, for the internal space. So the distances between are more than 6 metres and the windows are not face-to-face habitable room windows. So the conclusion is they're not so severe is on the basis that they're more than 6 metres and they're not face-to-face habitable room windows.
Thank you. And then there's also a question on overshadowing and the severity of that. And again, what are we measuring that against?
Well, we don't have any set measure either in the local plan policy, and we don't have any set measure in the design guide. We talk about the 45-degree rule. So if a line from a neighbouring window is hit by a building, you can generally conclude that that has an impact on the outlook. What that only looks at is buildings which are plot to plot next to each other. They don't look at plots where there's a road gap in between. So, yes, a line of sight from some of the existing neighbouring properties they would see this building and the line would hit this building, but it's pulled back. It's not immediately next to them on a plot by plot basis. And we're not. So that's why I've concluded that the overbearing isn't an issue, but we don't have any guidance or a threshold by which there's an overshadowing to be considered fallen below that we should review the application, if that makes sense. Our policies aren't that specific because every site has to be determined on its own merits and every site is really different. You could never really have a rule that says you can't. There's a precise measure.
So it is quite subjective.
Yes, it really is subjective. And the sun moves around. It depends on the time of year as to how severe. There are other buildings around the site, the landform of the site. So there are all lots of factors, and it is just a judgment. I can come to one conclusion, and someone else can come to a different conclusion.
Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. I found going through all the letters quite depressing, to be honest. And I think when we start talking about consulting with neighbours, I get the impression the relationship is so damaged that I wonder whether any future application would meet with approval. It just seems to be so polarised. I think Councillor Marcus did a good job of trying to summarise the almost try to separate the wheat from the chaff with some of the objections. Some were slightly spurious to me. Others I've got a lot of sympathy with. But on balance, I think that Lisa has presented an honest, fair report. And as a planning professional, I take that with the respect it should be. I'm also very mindful of the comments about housing. I've sat through hours and hours and hours of meetings about housing and the need to invest in our housing stock to attract young people to stay, to offer the skills we need in order to be a sustainable community. And I also walk around Hugh-Town almost every day and think, where isn't overdeveloped in Hugh-Town? The whole isthmus is pretty much overdevelopment. There's hardly a space where you can't sort of touch 3 or 4 properties with a long stick. So I think with the position I find myself in, I'm more sympathetic to this application along the lines of Councillor Guy.
So are you formally seconding Councillor Guy's proposal for approval at the moment, Councillor Williams, just to clarify?
I haven't yet. If anyone wants to jump for joy.
Sorry, I misunderstood. That's fine. You leave your position of consideration at the moment, and we're understanding of that position. Thank you. Councillor Steve Sims.
I'll pretty well echo what Councillor Williams just said. I mean, that some of the issues with it were, I thought, somewhat problematic. I mean, in terms of wind tunnels, there's loads of places there where you could test jet aircraft in. We have lots and lots of wind tunnels all over the place, and there doesn't seem to be significant damage. And Lisa did mention that the overshadowing is subjective. Well, I walk past that area a lot, and the main issue with overshadowing is Buzzer Hill, and I assume that's a bit of a logistical challenge to remove. I mean, there won't be overshadowing in that area. I wouldn't look much after 11 o'clock any day of the year because the bulk of the overshadowing is caused by Buzzer Hill, and then the sun comes around the corner. So I'm inclined to support it, and I will second the recommendations to grant.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. I'm not sure who put their hand up first. Councillor Marcus?
Cheers, thank you. Yeah, no, I was just, it's good to hear the monitoring officer talking about overdevelopment not being relevant. I would agree with that. The area is overdeveloped anyway. We've got a house which is kind of lots of houses which are out of character with traditional granite cottages all around that area, one right next door to it. I'm still concerned about the size of the building. I walked past it this morning trying to visualise it again. I can understand why the applicant has only lowered the building by 20 centimetres. Members generally don't like modern buildings, modern shaped boxy buildings. If the applicant was to remove the ridge, that's what we'd be left with. And I think members would be objecting to that. So it's kind of stuck between a rock, Buzzard Hill, and a hard place somewhere else. So given that, and given the subjectiveness of the overshadowing, which I've looked at the objections from some of the people and used the SunCalc website myself, and that doesn't really, I can't see that gives takes into account the topography of the land as well. I can't see that adding, like Councillor Sims said about Buzzard Hill, the sun hiding behind that as on its track. I can't see a compelling reason to refuse the application, so I will be seconding Councillor Guy's proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus, but I believe Councillor Sims got there before you. But thank you. Councillor Mumford, do you wish to speak again?
Yes, I take on board the overdevelopment, but I still think that we've got loss of light, overshadowing and overbearing. Is it in order for me to make a different recommendation?
Not at this stage, Chairman. Obviously, there's been a proposal to approve, and that has been seconded. So if that succeeds, then obviously approval is granted. If that fails, then obviously Mrs. Mumford can put some other proposal forward.
Okay, thank you for that, Stephen. Thank you. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Before I allow myself a couple of comments and then take the recommendation, is there anyone else who would like to speak who hasn't spoken before? Is that legacy hand, Councillor Mumford? Your hand is still showing.
Yes, Vice Chairman, it's Councillor Roger here on the phone, so you probably haven't picked me up. It is a difficult application. I would not to repeat what's been said. I would support Councillor Dean's, Williams and Guy's comments, and with deferment as such seemingly off the table, I would look to approve this application.
Thank you, Councillor Roger. I'm sorry, I should have asked anyone who's on the phone if they had any comments before we moved forward. Councillor Davis, I believe you're on the phone as well. Do you wish to add anything?
Yes, please. Thank you, Vice Chairman. I've listened to the debate with care and examined the objections with care and looked at the plans. We are facing a very polarised situation. I'm certainly not against developing the site. I feel the present plans are overbearing. I feel that the reduction in the ridge height of 8 inches is quite insignificant. I do not think that our previous reasons for deferment have been met. Looking at it overall, I think that the solutions to a polarised situation is a compromise, and as far as I'm concerned, I think that looking at the site, which I agree could well be developed, would only be suitable to have a single-storey building, and in view of the height, I do not think that our objections have been objected, and I will be voting against. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Right, if I could just make a couple of comments. We've all stated and we all know that this building is in a very sensitive coastal area as well as being within the AONB and conservation area. I recognise that the applicants have attempted to amend the current design in the light of issues and concerns raised before, but they haven't actually amended it in any significant areas. So I regret I don't consider that these amendments have been enough to allow me to support the application, and I consider that the amenity, there is a significant loss of amenity to the surrounding properties by virtue of the size, scale and massing of the current plans, and that this building would still remain unacceptably dominant and overbearing in this particular situation. And as such, a key issue I feel that we perhaps haven't focused on enough yet is that as such, the building would not preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area. Therefore, I will not be supporting this motion. If we now move to a vote, in view of the polarised views, both of the islanders who have responded to this application and around the council table, I think I'm going to ask the monitoring officer if he's kind enough to take a roll call on this particular vote. So we have Councillor Guy's recommendation to accept both recommendations 1 and 2, and Councillor Sims has seconded it. So if we could proceed to a vote.
Yes, certainly, Chairman. So the proposal is to approve the application for the, as set out in the report. So I will go through roll call in the same order as on the agenda again. So Councillor Dean.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to vote against that.
Councillor Davis.
Against. Hello?
Councillor Legg. Yes, certainly. Councillor Legg.
For.
Councillor Marcus.
For.
Councillor Roger.
For.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Watt has departed. Councillor Williams.
For.
Councillor Barkley is not here. Councillor Dorian Smith isn't here. Councillor Mrs. Grottick.
Against.
Councillor Guy.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Mumford.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Nellams isn't here, and Councillor Sims.
For.
So as I've recorded, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favour, and against are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that application is approved.
Thank you. Would somebody like to phone the chairman and ask him to rejoin the meeting, please?
Yeah, I'll do that immediately. Just by way of explanation, I've made contact with the chairman. He's on his way.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Have we informed Councillor Watt as well?
Good thinking, but he's here, I believe.
Yes, I am. Still here.
Welcome.
Okay.
Apologies all. I wasn't. It wasn't. My machine was not allowing me to rejoin. Thank you very much, Councillor Grottick. We'll move on to item 10 on our agenda, which is also in the hands of Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is brought to full council on the basis that the proposal is for a new unit of holiday let accommodation through the partial rebuilding of a fire-damaged barn as well as an extension. And the proposal would see a summer holiday let use with a winter staff let use. The barn at Carnfriars, the barns at Carnfriars were subject to a large fire in 2018, of which the main building has now gone. To the rear, however, is a range of buildings that were partially damaged, and it's proposed to retain the end section for agricultural storage use, but the applicant would like to partially rebuild the remaining structure to deliver a further unit of holiday-let accommodation to support and diversify Carnfriars Farm. The proposed scale and design have been assessed as acceptable and would accord with both the adopted and emerging local plan. It's noted that a further back emergent survey is required, and the recommendation is to delegate the approval for the application pending this further assessment of the buildings. But subject to that, which cannot take place now until the back active season, so there will be a delay for which I would have to agree an extension of time with the applicant. The proposal is recommended for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus?
Yeah, I can't see why this wouldn't be approved. Basically, I can't. Just as long as the environmental, ecological issues are resolved by to Lisa's satisfaction, then I would propose a recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I thought it was approval.
Thank you. Councillor Watt? You're muted, Councillor Watt.
Yes, Jonathan stole my thunder there. I was about to second it. I worked on that farm for 2 years, many, many years ago, and all I can say is I thoroughly recommend this application because, quite frankly, the existing buildings are a total mess.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anyone else wishing to come in on this application, so we have a proposer and a seconder. Is anybody against the approval of this application, please? No, then it's approved. Thank you. Item 11 on our agenda is Penrose 9 Garrison Lane, also in the hands of Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is brought to full council on the basis that the applicant is related to an officer at this authority. The report is a house order application that seeks to replace the traditional timber windows with a mock sash UPVC window and the installation of a bay window at the ground floor. So planning permission is required due to the removed permitted development rights as a result of an Article 4 direction made in 1995, which sees any alteration to a roof, painting the exterior of any building, or changes to windows and doors of any house on the islands. Those all need planning permission. In this case, the building is not a traditional granite construction or historic building, which would be harmed through the change in windows as proposed. There are numerous examples of windows within this type of building in and around St Mary's. The applicant describes the use of high-quality UPV finish, which will be in the style of sash windows and will seek to replicate the pattern of the existing windows. And it's considered the application does not harm the wider character of the conservation area, and the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Marcus?
Yeah, I propose this for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Guy?
Yes, I'll second the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick? Councillor Grottick?
I was just going to second the application for approval, Chairman. I didn't get in there quick enough.
Okay, thank you. So we have a proposer and a seconder for approval of this application. Is there anybody against this application, please? No, then it is approved. Thank you. Item 12 on our agenda is the Porthmelon Enterprise Centre. In your hands again, Lisa. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This application is brought to full council on the basis that the applicant is the council. The proposal seeks to install solar panels on the rear roof slope of the Porthmelon Enterprise Centre adjacent to the existing solar photovoltaics on this building. The panels are for the purposes of the EV chargers, the electric vehicle chargers that have already been approved along Morwell Lane and are an alternative to the installation of a solar canopy at that site. So whilst there are permitted development rights to install solar equipment on non-domestic buildings, planning permission is required in this case as the position is within 1 metre of the edge of the roof, which is one of the triggers for needing planning permission. The assessment has noted that the installation would not give rise to any adverse harm in terms of the amenity of neighbouring properties or in terms of the wider landscape and the context of the site within the AONB and the conservation area. And together with the fact that the proposal sees the generation of renewable energy source, it is considered to be appropriate and is recommended for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus?
Yeah, let's get this one done. I propose this one.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, very much welcome an increase in the amount of solar PV generation. I think this is well cited on the modern building and our second Councillor Marcus's proposal.
Thank you. Don't see anybody else wishing to comment. So we have a proposer and a seconder to approve this application. Anybody against the application, please? No, then it's approved. Thank you. Item 13 on our agenda is the GoEV project for electric vehicle chargers. Your hands again, Lisa. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this application is brought to full council, that is, the applicant is the council. The proposal seeks to amend the plans of the approved application P20037 FUL, which came to members for a decision in July. The GoEV project is seeking an amendment to the approved plans that would see one additional vehicle-to-grid charger for the electric vehicle car share scheme to be installed at this site in addition to the general use charger that's already been approved. The assessment has noted that the amended plan would not give rise to any adverse harm in terms of the amenity of neighbouring property or in terms of the wider landscape and the context of the LMB and the conservation area. The site would see one of the approved parking spaces being used for the parking of a car share vehicle, but is not considered that the parking of a vehicle in this space would give rise to adverse impacts on highway safety overall. And that the amendment is appropriate and is recommended for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus?
Yeah, it's a relatively minor amendment to what in the previously approved application. Just reading through the objections from the two objections, I can't see any planning reason to object to refuse the application, therefore I propose it.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chairman. I support what Councillor Marcus just says. I think the minimal extra aesthetic impact is outweighed by the benefits to the EV project and potentially for residents in the Telegraph area, so I'm going to second Councillor Marcus's recommendation.
Thank you. Any other comments, please? No, so we have a proposer and seconder for this application. Anybody against, please? No, so this application is also approved. Thank you. Item 14 on our agenda is Old Town Stores. In your hands, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application is brought to full council on the basis that it is a proposal for a new local need dwelling in place of the existing retail unit. The proposal is for a material change of use only of the existing A1 retail unit to a new unit of residential accommodation. The applicant has acknowledged the restrictions would need to be in place to ensure the accommodation is secure for meeting the local need in perpetuity and has agreed to the use of a Section 106 occupancy restriction. Of note for this application is that as a result, sorry, start again. This is a retail unit that has been closed since December 2018, and the applicants have communicated their attempts to secure a new tenant in accordance with its lawful planning use without success. So currently the emerging local plan, that's policy SS3, seeks to ensure ground floor retail units are not lost unnecessarily or frivolously to other uses. This is in the interest of seeking to retain a vibrant and vital town centre for the island. So policy SS3 seeks to ensure all redundant ground floor retail units are marketed for a minimum of 12 months. This applies only, however, to Hughtown and does not apply to retail units outside this designation. So providing no other harm is identified for the conversion of a ground floor retail unit outside Hughtown, regardless of how long it has been actively marketed, would accord with both the adopted and the emerging local plans for the Isles of Scilly. So loss of a retail unit is unfortunate, but it's been vacant for 2 years, and they have communicated that some marketing to try and get a new tenant in that building. But for material change of use only, subject to secure arrangements to restrict occupancy for those with a qualifying local need, the conversion of Old Town School to a permanent unit of residential accommodation is considered to be acceptable without giving rise to harm, subject to the conditions set out in the report and the applicant entering into the Section 106 agreement.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus?
I am... yes, good, this is going to be a 106 property. It's a pity that the shop can be made to work in Old Town, but that is beyond the applicant's power there. In paragraph 26, Lisa, you talk about, 25, you talk about space standards and how this is, according to our policies and government policy, this is small enough, it's large enough for one person but not large enough for two people. Could you kind of explain the difference with that and why that is?
Yeah, so the nationally described space standards are very broad brush, and it talks about the number of bedrooms, the number of occupants, the number of floors, and the gross internal floor space. So for one person, a single story, one bedroom unit of accommodation should achieve a minimum of 37 plus some storage space, 37 square metres or 39. For two people, that increases to 50 square metres is the minimum for two people. So it's very close, and it depends on what the applicant's calculations come out that it is just about big enough. My calculations come out that it's just falls below, and because it's very close and very tight, and it's an existing building where you can't really extend, it wouldn't be appropriate, in my view, to put another floor on there because of it's part of a complex of what I tend to be a traditional range of buildings that include the Old Town Inn and now the distillery. It would look a bit odd to put a floor above there. So you are really constrained by that footprint of the existing building. I don't think it's reasonable to say this shall only ever be occupied by a single person. I don't think that's a reasonable condition. I think it's just on the cusp of being too small, but not to the point that I would think it's refusable.
Okay, given that, I would propose the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's disappointing that the shop is going to go, especially with the self-build getting on its way. And I think the shop will be missed. It's been empty for 2 years. I think you could almost discard the last year, because who's going to take on a business in the last year? I'd like to have seen them run a bit longer, but I can't see any reason to refuse it. So I should be supporting it.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else with their hands up. Is that a seconding, Councillor Mumford?
No.
No. Okay. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. Just a question to Lisa, really, around the plant insulation and any renewable energy measures. I think we should be very strong on that, considering policy SS1 in the local plan.
I think I can't quite now remember if there's a condition on there or not. If you bear with me.
I didn't see one, but I might have overlooked it. And if there isn't, is that something we could ask for as a condition?
I think if I've not put one in there, I've considered it as a material change of use only. They're not making any alterations to that building other than changing its use, and that's the reason why I've not done it. And I can't now remember if the application included.
I would argue that we should be supporting developments certainly for habitation that are well insulated and warm and preferably low carbon. So I would be strongly pushing that as a condition if we recommend approval, if we grant approval.
I think minimize. I'm still there.
If I can help, Chairman, it may be that although this is just for a change of use and therefore it would not be appropriate to require such a condition, it could always be considered as part of section 160B.
Sorry, Stephen, are you able to speak up a little bit? I can hardly hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just saying that although this is just for a change of use, that it may not, Lisa may advise that it's not appropriate for conditioning. It may be something that she can discuss with them in relation to the Section 106 agreement.
Okay, thank you. Lisa, do you want to comment further?
Yeah, I mean, I've not considered the sustainable design measures on the basis that it is an existing building with no works proposed other than a material change of use. That's why I've not considered any sustainable design measures. I have recommended a condition to achieve the water consumption standards, but I haven't recommended a condition. I think it's worth a conversation with the applicant about a condition to see what. I suspect there will be insulation improvements and thermal efficiency improvements in the building. I don't know whether the applicant is looking at any other renewable energy generation or any water harvesting measures. There is very little scope outside of the red line of the building itself to do much more other than making the building more thermally efficient. So I think that's why I've gone down that road of not recommending an applicant submit a full sustainable design scheme, because this is an existing building.
I think that would be good if you can have a conversation with them, and I think at the very least making it thermally efficient would be, greatly appreciated by any future tenants. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Legg, please.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Mumford and Councillor Smith. It's a shame to see a retail outlet go, especially one in a growing part of our population. But it has been let available and marketed. So, I will second the proposal and, as Councillor Smith said, ask for a request that it is made thermally efficient.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, in terms of that thermal efficiency, it's probably worth noting that this property is next to a pub, and we've had issues with properties next to pubs previously, so that thermal efficiency is probably good in terms of sound muting as well. So it's probably worth mentioning that.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a proposer and seconder to approve this application. Is there anybody against this application, please? Is so, then it is approved. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lisa. Item 15 on our agenda is our risk and Q2 non-financial performance report. And that's in the hands of our Officer for Policy and Scrutiny, Bob Dawson, being introduced by Paul Masters, our Chief Executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. Good morning. Yeah, Bob will go into the detail later. The only thing that I wanted to say is, obviously, you'll see some areas where we haven't performed particularly as well as we'd have wanted, and that's because some of the services that we offer to the people of the islands have been shut during the COVID period. So I think we know that we've lived in a very strange year, but we can go through that in a minute. You'll also note that I've added an additional risk around the ongoing COVID issue. Mainly that's economic, both in terms of what the long-term impacts may well be on the economy, and therefore the impacts on us as a council in terms of business rates, etc., are one that I want to keep a particular weather eye on, as well as we change to new working methods. The only last thing I wanted to say, Chairman, was a sort of heads up in the fact that you'll know, in terms of our ongoing improvement as a council, you'll note in the report that the steady progress towards things such as mandatory training and PDS compliance, sickness absence, etc., on our upward trajectory of managing ourselves as an efficient council, and in consultation with the Chair of Scrutiny, we will be taking a report early in the new year to Scrutiny about suggested outturn, allowing members to have input into target setting this year for the first time, so that next year those targets that will be in place for all services will have had member input and challenge in terms of how we're setting the targets for officers to achieve on your behalf in line with the budget. So that's just to give some wider context to the report, Chairman, but I'll hand over to Bob for specifics.
Thank you very much, Paul. Bob, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for that introduction, Paul. I'll take the report and the appendices as read. However, for the benefit of those listening in, there's one or two changes to risk and non-financial performance as reported for quarter two. First of these is there's a specific risk added at the request of the Chief Executive relating to the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on our services, and also in the covering report at paragraph 7. There's a reference to de-escalation in terms of the risk scores, but that refers to quarter one, not to quarter two, and probably shouldn't have been included. My error, Chairman. Secondly, red, amber, green rating, or RAG rating, has been applied to the quarter two non-financial performance this quarter, and the details are provided in the report. However, this kind of rating is only as effective, much as Paul's referred to, as how well the targets themselves relate to operational resource and statutory requirements. So in some cases, the targets have been offered to us by the services themselves at the start of the year. In others, they're simply based on last year's performance. In that latter case, this is simply a default, really, and that target may not necessarily be achievable, particularly, as we've heard, during a pandemic. We recognise this weakness in the current process, essentially, and much as Paul has just mentioned, please be assured that more representative target setting is the focus of the coming year's service planning, due to be completed in February of 2021, and the Democratic and corporate team are already working on this. In terms of that target setting, it's an improving process to join up non-financial performance and service planning. It will mean that those service plans are more closely linked to quarterly performance reporting, which will facilitate oversight from members on a quarterly basis and inform the Scrutiny Committee work plan. So thank you, Chairman. That concludes my introduction.
Thank you very much. Any members wishing to come back on this report, please? Councillor Marcus?
Yeah, it's good to see some statistics. Mandatory training, that's really good. When 51% of PDPs, it'd be good to see that more, that number go up about waste. I know the waste targets and numbers are loads smaller than last year, but given the targets in the corporate plan, where are we with the diversion rate and the retained waste?
Thank you. Paul, do you wish to come back first?
Yeah, I can get back on that. I think Nicola's on the call as well in terms of waste. But in terms of your question around PDPs, as I've said to members, it's my aspiration that we have 100% compliance before the end of this year. So I will continue to push that number up, and I would hope to see a much bigger trajectory by the Q3, Councillor. So that's my stated intent, and that's what the management team, your management team, are pushing all of our officers to complete.
Thank you.
Chairman, shall I reply in terms of waste? It's Nicola. I think by year end we'll be back on target. It's been a funny old year, so particularly in relation to our commercial waste, but having spoken to the team, by year end we'll be back onto target. So watch those figures increasing drastically in Q3.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to comment on the health and safety, I thought that was really good to see, and obviously mustn't be complacent about health and safety, hugely important in the organisation. There's a blank against climate change. We'll be discussing this at Climate Emergency Working Group on Thursday. Obviously, it can't stay blank. We need to deal with this risk, so I think that's an area for further work. Councillor Marcus asked the question I was going to ask about waste, so pleased to hear that answer. And actually worth noting that I discovered not long ago that our recycling rates are considerably higher than Cornwall, so I think that's something to be quite proud of. And the last question I had was around staff vacancies. Again, what's the impact on services and budget of these vacancies? Thank you.
We've got a budget session later specifically on setting the budget, Councillor, in terms of you'll note that I think Russell reported to members, and he's on the call as well, that we're expecting an underspend in this year's budget. And of course, some of that will be attributable to a number of things, some of which are vacancy margins as well. I haven't got the specific number readily to hand, but in terms of there are many budget areas that are underspent because either we haven't been operating services, but at the same time there have been some that have been overspent, such as waste, etc., that Nicholas just referred to. So, Russell, I don't know whether you wanted to mention anything about your update on where we might be in terms of the overall council budget.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, we did the second quarter report last meeting. We're predicting that we will be underspending, I think, in the region of 60,000 for the year at the moment. I think that's quite a prudent position. I think that could increase the underspend when we look at it for the third quarter. At the moment, it's predicting a small underspend, which may increase slightly.
Thank you, Russell. Any other members wishing to come in, please? No. Well, we have two recommendations, members, that you endorse the corporate risk register and that you also endorse the quantitative Q2, the 2021 non-financial performance information and targets. Could I have a proposer for these two recommendations, please? Councillor Grottick. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any member against these recommendations, please? No, then they're carried. Thank you very much. Thank you for your report, Bob and Paul. Item 17 on our agenda is the housing repair and maintenance programme, which is in the hands of our Senior Manager, Nicola Stinson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Rachel Guy's also on the call in case you want to ask any more detailed questions. But I think I wanted to bring this report to you following our report in September 19 that set out the stock condition survey work that had been undertaken with our social stock. And it was a difficult time, wasn't it, because the report told us that the stock was in very poor condition, and members authorised a capital investment programme to improve our stock, with a key focus in the first 2 years really on bringing our stock up to standard, making sure they were safe and that our landlord obligations were met. And I think I'm pleased to report now that despite disruptions caused by the COVID pandemic, the programme is on track and significant progress has been made. The council housing stock is now regulatory compliant. Our high priority works have been completed, and where possible we've engaged tenants within that process and given them choice into how the works have been undertaken, and Sally Port, the window design, was an example of that. The regulator of social housing has been updated with the position we're in, and they are satisfied with the progress made. We're not on their watch list anymore. So we've got some significant works to start in the new year. We aren't there yet, but by the end of March, all the highest priority work will have been completed. And then we enter a phase of what I call cyclical repair and maintenance. So we're over that hump of bringing the properties back up to standard. And now we get into what's going to be what I would call our normal bread and butter work, which is going to be keeping our stock at the right standard year in, year out as a cyclical programme of repair that features as part of our ongoing capital programme. So that's where we are now. And I think to help us with that, Rachel's done some great work with Cornwall to access something called the Green Homes Grant. That will help us bring our properties up to the EPC, the energy efficiency standard levels. And despite what's in the actual report itself, the grant agreements come through, and instead of £170,000 towards that improvement works to our energy efficiency of our homes, we've actually got £238,000. So recommendation 2 needs updating in the right way. 28 properties we can now use that funding on to bring them back up to standard, and that reflects a recognition of the cost of doing repairs on the island. We'll also be chasing further funding in relation to that national scheme. So I think where possible we'll continue to look for external funding, and we'll look for those grant funding opportunities for energy efficiency in particular, because that seems to be some funding that the government are releasing for local authorities to access. So I think it's a good news report for me, because actually the way we've run the programme, how it's been managed by Rachel and her team, how she's managed the contractors, and how we've worked with our tenants has been an exemplar of how we should work into the future. And I'm heartened by the work that's been done so far, and it's a good basis to build on our future repair programme. So the recommendations are set out in the report for you, but with an update on recommendation 2, which is to increase that capital programme by £238,000 rather than the 170 which was originally reported. So thanks to the team, and I hope you're pleased with the progress so far, members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Councillor Dean, please.
A great report. Good news in a hard time, and I think hats off to the team for staying on track through the pandemic. I think it's remarkable, and the Green Homes Grant is fantastic. It's a win-win. It's all good. So well done, Nicola and Rachel and everyone else involved. Fantastic.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well done, everyone. It's always good to be removed from a watch list, and I know that the state of our social housing has concerned members for some time, so this is a really good news story, and it's great to be included in the Green Homes Grant. It's on a similar area. It's frustrating as a householder to be phoned up by someone telling you can have free access to this installation programme and that installation programme, and when you give them your postcode, they say, oh, sorry, it doesn't include, the Arts and City is not included. So the Green Homes Grant is a real step in the right direction. So well done, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Grottick. Councillor Legg.
Thank you. Yeah, just wanted to echo those congratulations to the housing team for this. It's really good work. Should be very proud. And good luck with the grant. So sounds brilliant.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you again. Would echo all the positive comments. In the report, it talks about tenancies not being able to be granted to properties class F and G with an EPC rating. After the Green Homes Grant has been spent, will we still have any social properties that fit into that F and G category?
Thank you. Nicola, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, so the intention at the end of this year was to bring all our properties up to that standard using that Green Homes Fund. The good news as well is that the next phase of Green Homes Fund will be aimed at properties at Band D. So we should be able to, what we need to aim to get to is C on all our properties. So our long-term aim in my head is to get to C. The grant will get us to E. The further grant should get us to D, and our further investment programme hopefully will take us to C in the not-too-distant future. So we're on a trajectory of improvement up to EPCC.
Thank you. Councillor Sims?
Yeah, well, just reiterate congratulations, especially on the basis that we were in quite a bad place 2 or 3 years ago, and it's been a massive improvement, and I know how much work has been done, and well done. And I think that we've had a proposal and seconded, but I would be happy to second if it's not been seconded already. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus?
Yeah, it's nice to see a capital programme actually happening and being progressed. So that's really good. You said you've got more money now from the Greens programme. That's and we're going to match fund that from the existing housing maintenance budget. Is that increased amount going to have any effect on the maintenance of the houses at all? And have residents been communicated with in terms of the works going into the house? Just be wary of people going back into the houses all the time, again, as more grants come through.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So what we've been trying to do is make sure that we wrap projects together. So you'll see at Enna Close in particular, we've tried to wrap works together around a particular geographical area. So we're trying to minimise tenant disruption where possible. Where we've got Green Homes Grant, this was bringing forward works from a previous year, from a future year, brought the schemes forward. And we've got to get tenant consent to do that. And I think the lessons learned from the Smart Energy Islands programme is to work with tenants and work with them around their availability and getting access to properties. So I think we've got grant for 28 properties. At the moment, we've got consent from 20 people to do that. We want to get the consent before. We're not imposing this. This is a choice we're giving to our tenants. Most people understanding the benefits of energy efficiency, and it means that your home's going to be warmer and more comfortable. Most people are accepting that, but you're right, there is a little bit of fatigue in terms of how much work and repair we've been doing to the properties. So we're working with our tenants to make that more acceptable to them, while still managing the delivery of the programme. So close tenant engagement through Rachel and the team has been really important throughout this. And the feedback we've had has been very positive so far.
Thank you, Nicola. Have I missed anybody? Please, anybody waiting to come in? No? Well, thank you very much. I would like to say from the chair as well, the state of our housing stock has been concerning me greatly for a number of years, and I'm absolutely delighted with all the work that the housing team have done recently and are going to do in order to benefit our residents. So I'm very thankful to you all, and it's great to see this moving forward. Thank you. So we've got two recommendations. Recommendation one is that members note the work completed to date and the planned work due to commence. And number two, that members approve an increase of £238,000 in the council's capital programme funded from external grants. We have a proposer and a seconder. Is there anybody against the approval of these recommendations, please? No, then they're carried. Thank you very much indeed. That concludes part one of our agenda today. Part two reports are for information only. Item 18 is the delegated planning application. Item 19 is a decision note, which Chief Executive Paul Masters would just briefly like to comment on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It was only just to give you the latest figures that you might be interested in terms of the number of businesses that we've been able to support in two ways during the second lockdown. So you'll remember there was one element of financial support to businesses based on business rates payable. And so far we've had 191 businesses we've supported with £1,334. We've had 17 that we've supported with £2,000 and 8 with £3,000, which gives a total of £312,794 from that government fund for this month. The second was, if you remember, the discretionary fund, which is what this decision note refers to, where we had £44,000. So far, we've had 14 applicants, all of whom will receive the £1,300, the same as the grant above, and therefore there is currently an underspend, which we will have available until the 31st of March. So I will be talking to members further about where you may wish to use that money, ranging probably from having a hardship fund for ongoing business support, perhaps. But I'll discuss that with members further in terms of any underspend that we can utilise before the end of the financial year, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that update, Paul. Item 20 on the agenda is the members' updates, and I would just like to thank all the lead members who have done updates for Council today. That concludes our Council meeting, and thank you very much indeed for your attendance. Thank you.